to this live stream where I will be looking at a video by Swami Tadatmananda ji, who is from America. He's from, I think, Boston, Massachusetts. He is the minister for the Osha Bodha Center. He does amazing videos, and I've been a massive fan of his. Well, not a fan, I would say. Well, if I'm learning from him, he's more or less like a teacher for me. And I've learned so much from his videos. Now, he has this incredible way of utilizing animation or images, and also he just has really great examples and a really vibrant personality. So we're going to react to that video, and basically in a few minutes we'll take a look into that. And then the other thing that I want to mention is that I will be doing I will be making an announcement about something. Obviously, there won't be much detail, so stick around to the end for that. If you're following me on social media, you kind of know what I'm talking about. So, so yes. So let me get the screen ready. So, and also, if you can like this video, if you can put in your comments, it's a discussion. So there may be something that Swamiji says that really catches your attention that you really like. Let me know. And there may be something that I say that you may want to challenge. Let me know as well. It's all an open discussion. So nobody's right, nobody's wrong. It's all about understanding what Swamiji is trying to say. So, so yeah, if you have any questions, you can also put them in, and maybe we can answer them when I pause to react. But yes, this is all about learning. This one, it's not really me making fun of anything. Those videos you tend to know in advance that I'll be making fun of them, but this is really educational. This is me really learning, and I've watched this video before, and to be honest, when I first watched it, there was a lot in there for me to take in, and it's such a video that I think would require a few, viewings to actually really understand the message. Hello, Distiana. Nice to meet you again. So yeah, so and also I consider Swamiji to be one of the few genuine teachers out there who are kind of in the mainstream. So that's another thing that I would like to say. So let me get this ready. Let me share my screen and get it set up and ready. Yes, so here we go. Okay. I was hoping that it would just show the full screen, but for some reason it's showing it like that. Don't know why. But yes. Right, let's get started. And let me know if the sound is good. Hopefully it should be all good. For Swamiji's, for the video especially.
Over the centuries, followers of Shankara, Ramanuja, and Madhva have argued about the ultimate nature of reality. the nature of Brahman. Some of their arguments were surprisingly combative and vehement. They used sophisticated logic like a weapon to tear apart conclusions held by their opponents.
So before I go into this, so Swamiji is very true. Like I've had debates or discussions with people who have different, but the Vishishta Advaitins, they're actually okay. Like they're nice, they're pretty respectful, and you can have a conversation, and they see where you're coming from. The Dvaita, the ones that believe in duality, they're a bit more dramatic. And I have to say, even us on the Advaita side can be really dramatic. So, and we can be really like kind of we're right and have this kind of fierce battle. I'm yet to have a conversation with a Hare Krishna that can be done in a proper manner, like here. So, if you know anyone that's willing to have a conversation with me, it, more to do with learning rather than actually debating who's right, because I think people get scared when you say debate. So, I think it's more about learning each other's perspectives and not about changing anyone's perspective, but more or less respecting it. So, but that doesn't mean that I have my apprehensions about these philosophies. But yeah, so let's have a let's go back a bit and let's start again.
And vehement. They used sophisticated logic like a weapon to tear apart conclusions held by their opponents. And they erected fortresses of facts to defend their own positions. These scholarly battles began many centuries ago, and they continue even today. Towards the end of this presentation, we'll discuss several ways to resolve all this divisiveness. The teachings of Shankara, Ramanuja, and Madhva are all based on the very same foundation. They all come from the inspired discoveries of the rishis, ancient sages like Bhrigu, Vishishta, and Yajnavalkya. Their remarkable wisdom was collected in Sanskrit scriptures called Upanishads. The main Upanishads are found at the very end of each of the 4 sacred Vedas. So that body of wisdom has come to be known as Vedanta. Vedanta is based not only on the Upanishads, but also on the famous Bhagavad Gita and on a highly analytical text, the Brahma Sutras. But the problem is, all of these scriptures are subject to being interpreted in various ways. In the 8th century, there lived a young spiritual genius from Kerala named Shankara, also known as Adi Shankara.
I must say, if anyone from the amount of spiritual icons that have come from Kerala is unbelievable. There's that place seems to be like this center of spiritual wisdom. I kind of really like their so yeah, this is about Adi Shankaraji. But before that, Swamiji gave a great overview of Vedanta. I thought it was pretty good, pretty to the point, without going too deep into it. So yeah, I'm interested to see what else he's going to say. I had a good talk with an ISKCON monk at the Ratha festival. He was very respectful, and we just landed on and enjoyed the commonality of ISKCON and Advaita Vedanta. Oh, that's really sweet. I mean, yeah, I like the fact they can do that. This is kind of good. It's what it should be about.
Or Shankaracharya. He interpreted those scriptures according to a strictly non-dual point of view, Advaita. Then, in the 11th century, came Ramanuja, who was a free-thinking and somewhat rebellious spiritual teacher from Tamil Nadu. He completely rejected Shankara's interpretations of the scriptures as being far too extreme, too radical. Ramanuja reinterpreted the scriptures according to his own perspective, a perspective known as qualified non-dualism, or Vishishta Advaita. Later yet, in the 13th century, came Madhva, or Madhvacharya, who was a pious monk from Karnataka. Madhva rejected the philosophically complex interpretations of both Shankara and Ramanuja, and instead he advocated a simpler interpretation of the scriptures, an interpretation based on dualism, Dvaita. Each of these great scholars wrote elaborate Sanskrit commentaries on the Upanishads, on the Bhagavad Gita, and on the Brahma Sutras. In those commentaries, they each firmly established their own interpretations and thoroughly refuted the interpretations of others.
Brilliant introduction. Great way of just defining what those philosophies mean. Just to say that Swamiji is actually an Advaita Vedantin, so he mainly teaches from that lens. In fact, his guru is Swami Dayananda ji. He's passed away now, but he was a very staunch non-dualist, but a very good non-dual teacher. And the two biggest, or the three biggest kind of missions or movements that have come from that are more in recent times of Advaita Vedanta is the Oshabodha Center. Then you have the Ramakrishna Mission, which is probably the biggest. And then you have, there was another one that I was thinking of, the Ramakrishna Mission. Oh yeah, Chinmaya Mission. So they all are essentially in Advaita Vedanta. The wonderful thing about, I would say, Ramakrishna Mission is that it openly will take in different perspectives, whilst with the others, they're very much on the non-dual perspective. But they all have one thing I do admire from all three of these places is that they create swamis, they create swaminis, they create teachers. They look to enhance understanding through practice, through intellectual understanding, through logic. So that's one thing I really do admire about these three particular movements. Ayurveda is focused in Kerala too. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. But that says everything. What made you choose this video today? Good question. I've actually been meaning to do this for a long time. Anyone that's known that I was going to, everyone's known that I was going to do this eventually. But yeah, and I'd actually picked this for this week a few weeks ago. So yeah, it's not because of what happened yesterday on TikTok Live where I got banned probably from Iskonites. I still stay staunchly on my views that I disagree with their philosophy. Doesn't mean that I dislike them. So TikTok obviously doesn't understand nuance in conversation. So still banned. Appeal was submitted. But yeah, it's what happens when you speak your truth, isn't it? I've heard people say much worse, and and their lives are never touched. And I'm not going to say what religion they're from. But yeah, let's go back to Swamiji.
The Brahma Sutras. In those commentaries, they each firmly established their own interpretations and thoroughly refuted the interpretations of others. Let me try to summarize very briefly the main differences between their perspectives. First of all, Shankara taught that Brahman, the underlying reality because of which everything exists, has no attributes or qualities whatsoever. Brahman is an absolute, transcendent reality, beyond the world, beyond all creatures, and even beyond Ishvara, God, who created all this. For Shankara, the world is not as real as Brahman. It is mithya, consisting merely of names and forms, like a pot that's merely a name and form of clay. Shankara taught that Atma, the true inner self, is utterly non-separate from Brahman. When this truth goes unrecognized due to ignorance, you become subject to suffering. Liberation is gained by discovering that Atma is not separate from Brahman, and this knowledge puts an end to all suffering, both in this lifetime and thereafter. According to Ramanuja, the ultimate reality.
So that was a really good explanation, very quick summary. As Swamiji said, it's something that is relatively quicker, but I kind of really like. The only thing that I would add is that with Advaita, the only thing that I felt was missing there was, and maybe I don't know if Swamiji mentions this later on, but Adi Shankarji did not take away people away from the relative reality so much so. And in fact, this was probably from Swami Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna. They focused a lot on mithya being on two levels. It's unreal at the absolute level, but real while you're in this name and form, in this kind of in this relative reality. So I think that's the only thing I would have added. But since he's not part of the Ramakrishna mission, that's fine. It's not some major point. But yeah. Hey Martin. Good to see you. Yeah, good to see you again too. Yes, I don't look left and right anymore. I just see Advaita Vedanta, and that's it. And especially when I'm crossing the road. But yeah, if you want to really do non-duality, I think Swamiji should have included the Neo-Advaita scene here to be more fair. So yeah, now he's going to go into Vishishta Advaita, which I'm really interested to see what he's going to say in regards to that, because this is always interesting. And yes, hello, Spiritual Samurai. Nice to see you, brother, joining us. And he's got a good account on TikTok. He's got two accounts, Spiritual Samurai and Vedic Oracle. It's a good one to check on TikTok. And I think on Instagram too.
Is Brahman as Lord Vishnu, who possesses limitless power.
This is interesting. So it's basically, one, it's Saguna Brahman, but it's Vishnu in particular. So with Vishishta Advaita, you will see them, worshipping a form of Vishnu more. So that's an interesting one to note.
And infinite divine attributes. Attributes like being creator of the world and source of blessings. Ramanuja considers the world to be as real as Lord Vishnu. The world is a material or physical aspect of Lord Vishnu, his physical body, so to speak. For Ramanuja, the inner self of each person is a tiny part of Lord Vishnu's infinite divine being. Atma is like a little glowing spark emitted by a huge blazing fire. Liberation is gained by surrendering to Lord Vishnu and reaching him after death. According to Madhva, the ultimate...
Again, an interesting one. I'm not going to give my perspective on what I think about Vishishta Advaita. There's obviously some logical things I can think about when you say you're a part of something, but I won't go into that completely. This is going to be the interesting one. Dvaita.
Reality is Lord Vishnu as a personal God who is separate from the world and its beings. Madhva famously taught 5 kinds of separateness or difference. Difference between material things, difference between material things and Atma, or soul, difference between material things and Lord Vishnu, difference between individual souls, and difference between each soul and Lord Vishnu. For Madhva, liberation is gained through intense devotion, devotion that invokes Lord Vishnu's grace and saves you from suffering in one life after another.
So again, with when it comes to Dvaita, you can see kind of the difference, which is kind of major. If you think about it, these are major differences where you have where Brahman is basically, or the ultimate reality has no attribute. And then you look at Dvaita dualism, there's a personal God. Massive difference in terms of a philosophical point of view, where you can even argue that Brahman is seen as very close to the Buddhist shunyata, emptiness. But it's not so much so because of the concept of Satchitananda. Now, but that remarkable difference of, and then the separation is the intense one. So when we look at actual philosophy, there are major differences between each 3 of them, but mainly between Advaita and Dvaita, there's massive differences of in terms of philosophical points, and it's up to us really what we think works for us. Like, I can see why a lot of people would like Vishishta Advaita. I think that's an interesting path to take. I can see why that can be appealing, and then I can even see why people will find Dvaita more appealing. Now, what I would say is Dvaita is a lot like the Abrahamic religions, and it's why a lot of people probably, if they leave an Abrahamic religion, they probably go to something more of Dvaita, because it mirrors somewhat some of the kind of philosophical points they may agree upon. Or you have the exact opposite, where they may be like, well, I want something where this truth, or where this highest point is not so tangible. And that's where Advaita comes into play, and why we see a lot of people going into Advaita. Now, the problem is, and we discuss this a lot on our YouTube lives, that without the foundation, Advaita can become really misleading. Like it can mislead you completely. And it's really important that we have that foundation understanding before we even think about even saying that this reality is nirgun. So that's something I really think we can think about. So let me look at some of the comments, and then we'll return to the video. So Guy G says, so Guy is basically with the username Shut Up and Show Me, which is probably a good thing when it comes to spiritual practice. It should be about, really showing your spiritual practice. I believe all 3 methods of liberation can apply regardless of the school of thought. I would agree with you, but where I would disagree is that with knowledge, you're in control, or the appearance of control, and it's a simpler way. Now, to win, and also there's a lot of and then to get to the surrender thing, I can even go with as well. But the grace aspect, I'm not so much of a fan of. not saying it's not a possibility. I think you can get to liberation, but the idea should be, what do they define as liberation? I think maybe Swamiji will go into that later on, because that will be the defining point of whether you would agree with those three. But for me, when it comes to grace, it really is in the hands of some personal God, which I personally don't agree with. I don't follow or believe in a personal God at all. But say if one did, say if I entertain this for 1 second, then to win the grace of that, it would be, it would have to be in a very authoritative manner. You need to have rules and regulations, which then builds up this really regulated religion or philosophy. So that's that's where my issue would be. Um, so yeah, but I think right now on a overview, it's all good. So yeah, but yeah, outside of the Bhagavad Gita, they don't mention Krishna as much. Yes, they don't, and there's a reason for that. The Upanishads do not mention Krishna at all, and neither does and the vast array of philosophy doesn't. The only thing is that somehow I think the Bhagavad Gita has taken its place in people's homes, especially in India. So with that, you know, I can see why. And the thing is, the Bhagavad Gita is so smart as a text. Like, it's incredible how basically all three, like for example, in the Upanishads, you can kind of see where they're going towards. Brahma Sutras, again, you can see where it's leaning towards. With the Bhagavad Gita, you can easily manipulate a text to fit all three of these. Like, I can see why Madhvacharya can easily manipulate the Bhagavad Gita to dualism, when I would say actually that's completely misleading. But the thing is, you can create a philosophy out of it, misleading or not misleading. So that's an interesting point. Yeah, and it's true. Krishna is not mentioned otherwise. It's only in the Bhagavad Gita or in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Advaita is heavy. We need to take our time and wading into it. Absolutely agree. I do think we need to take time. It's really heavy in terms of, one, it's simple. Now, with something being so simple, it can be incredibly complicated for our mind. And that's why the foundational texts are so important. Um, so, when wading in for a newbie, what do you suggest? So, Dustiana, good question. Now, I would always say Advaita. And the reason for that is because, as much as the other two may be helpful to some degree, Advaita actually takes you to a deeper place. It tells you things without kind of coddling you, without giving you, it gives the least amount of concessions to the truth. And if you really want the truth, and that's what you're looking for, then that's what you want. You want something that will give you something uncompromised as much as possible. And Advaita does that. And it doesn't care how we feel about it. It really doesn't. It's like, if you want the truth, this is what it is. And you have to leave your personality behind. So the easiest and simplest is Advaita, but but the appeal of the other two is there depending on what your state of mind is. But if and this is the biggest thing, Dustiana, that I will mention, if you go through the foundational texts that Adi Shankarji had written, like Tattva Bodh, Atma Bodh, Aparokshanabhuti, Vivek Chodamuni. There's so many of these texts, Digdishya Viveka, all these texts, if you go through them, it makes Advaita so much more easier to go through. It's so beautiful then, because then you won't get into the neo Advaita perspective where it's like there's nothing here, no story, no self, no liberation, no consciousness, no awareness. You won't go down that path, because the foundation will tell you that you have an elemental body, but that's not who you really are, and then gives you the knowledge, the jnanam, in order to get liberation. So yeah, uh, absolutely agree with you, spiritual samurai. Think of all the Hindu gods that anyone can be drawn to one as a personal god. Yes. See, I so when I do my meditation sessions every Saturday, I see it as Saguna Brahman rather than a personal God. But we can make concessions because it can help. Um, yeah, and I totally agree with you in terms of any of the Hindu deities can be considered a personal god. So whether that's any of the devis, any of the devas, so that can be really helpful. Um, And yes, I agree with what Guy G has said as well. Like, take your time with Advaita. It's deceptively simple. But yeah, so um, and the thing, and what I like about Advaita is that you're in control. Like, even though the appearance of control is rather, limited, but at least you have to learn. You have to work on yourself. Going through the process of Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. So Shravana meaning listening, Manana meaning like practicing and integrating what you've listened to, and then Nididhyasana, again, practicing, meditating, contemplating upon the teachings. So you have to go through that process, which is why it's so brilliant. So yes, brilliant comments so far. So let's continue with this amazing video by Swamiji.
Intense devotion, devotion that invokes Lord Vishnu's grace and saves you from suffering in one life after another. That's a lot of information. To make it a bit easier to grasp, here's a simple way to visualize these three different perspectives. In Advaita Vedanta, Brahman alone exists. All else is merely name and form. In Vishishta Advaita, Lord Vishnu exists along with the material world and individual souls, all of which are parts or aspects of Lord Vishnu, parts that are not separate from him. In Dvaita Vedanta, Lord Vishnu exists along with the material world and individual souls, all of which are completely separate or different from each other and from Lord Vishnu.
I just want to go back to that. Let me. So what a brilliant image to describe literally what the what the different philosophies are. So you can see that here you can see my pointer a little bit, but you can see how Advaita, there's only Brahman. It's really simple. There's only that Nirgun Brahman. There's only the formless awareness, nothing else. Then you have here, you have the formless awareness in Vishishta Advaita, but you have forms within it, and basically and you have that spark, different parts of the formless, but eventually everything will go into the formless. And then Dvaita is you have your formed God, and then you have different jeeves, different your individual souls. So yes, awesome. Yes, I would just echo what Gaiji has said to you, Dastiana. Swami Sarvapriyananda, his talks on the Bhagavad Gita, even the introductory text, I think he's done some on Drigdishya Viveka and Aparokshanubhuti. Definitely check him out. So on YouTube, it's Vedanta New York, Vedanta NY, and then Vedanta Talks on podcasts. But amazing teacher, very humble. Yes, and you can even start off with reading the works of Swami Vivekananda, or at least read the four yogas and read inspired talks by Swami Vivekananda. Those are really good places to begin with as well. So let's continue.
Individual souls, all of which are completely separate or different from each other and from Lord Vishnu. Now, this comparison is extremely brief, and it omits many important details about each of the three teachings. Not only that, but it completely omits several other kinds of Vedanta that are perhaps less prominent, but they're equally important. They're based on other interpretations of the scriptures, interpretations by Yadava Prakasha, Nimbarka, Vallabha, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Obviously, we can't discuss all their teachings here, but that's really not the purpose of this presentation. The purpose is to understand why the followers of Shankara, Ramanuja, and Madhva have argued so stridently with each other over the ages. Why is there so much divisiveness among them?
It's kind of true. Like, if you think about it, if we say there's only Brahman, then why are we fighting on a philosophical point of view with people who believe in duality? It's an interesting perspective. And yes, so you saw there Achintya Bheda, and that's basically the Hare Krishnas. They mainly follow that belief system. So of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Even though I personally believe Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was possibly more Advaitin as they would like to admit, in my opinion. But they know more if they feel otherwise. You did buy the riddles of Hinduism. Awesome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Yes. Also, spiritual samurai, you're right. Running around saying we're all one doesn't mean that one has got it. That's true. Like, it really has to be a practice. It really needs to be something we put into our lives and integrate it. I felt like I started to get it when I could look at anyone and start to feel that we share the same consciousness. Yes. Rupa Spira, again, when he says, when he talks about the shared being, and obviously the shared being is in all of existence, it does bring space into your life, and you see a lot more with, as you mentioned, with love and compassion. Totally agree. So I think now, yes, so Swamiji is now going to talk about the problem of divisiveness and why, whether that's good or bad, I guess. Obviously it's bad. He said it's a problem. So
In general, divisiveness of any kind can be harmful. Divisiveness between racial, social, and religious groups has led to terrible problems in the world. Problems like discrimination, terrorism, and war. Divisiveness between liberals and conservatives here in the United States has weakened our social fabric and even threatens to destroy the unity of our nation. And divisiveness among the followers of Shankara, Ramanuja, and Madhva can result in harm to modern spiritual seekers. How? Let me tell you a story. Decades ago, I used to teach at my guru's ashram in Pennsylvania. One day, after I finished teaching a class, a young woman from an Indian family approached me and said, "These teachings are wonderful. I wish my parents could come here." I asked, "Where do your parents live?" She said, "Not far, but they would never come here." "Why not?" I asked. She said, "Because my parents come from a traditional Vaishnava community in Tamil Nadu." She went on to explain that before coming to the U.S., her parents used to attend lectures by teachers from the Vishishta Advaita tradition of Ramanuja. In those lectures, her parents were strictly warned to always avoid the teachings of Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. Another example of this kind of divisiveness is found in ISKCON, the organization of the modern Hare Krishna movement. ISKCON is associated both with Madhva's Dvaita Vedanta and with the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Teachers and members of ISKCON often vilify Shankara, accusing him of being a Mayavadi, one who claims that God is a mere illusion. These examples are not meant to criticize anyone, but rather to show how spiritual seekers are sometimes restricted or prohibited from freely searching for answers to their questions in Hinduism's vast ocean of spiritual wisdom.
That's very true. And I'd like to know what you think about that. Now, he omitted um, Advaita Vedanta in that. And I will tell you why. I've never come across an Advaita Vedantin that has turned around and said that you cannot look at the other teachings of Vishishta Dvaita or look at the teachings of Dvaita either. Like basically, you can look at them, you can learn from them, you can see whether you agree or disagree with them, because the main purpose is to learn. Now, the other issue is with modern day seekers is that we don't, for example, if I want to learn about Vishishta Dvaita, instead of actually me understanding the other person's point of view, I'm thinking about how to counteract their argument with the philosophy that I follow. But it should be the other way. It should be where I try to understand them, fully understand it, and then give my points across. But that has to happen on two ways. Um, but we never call. I've never heard any Advaita Vedantin. I don't know if you can. I don't know if anyone else has, but I've never come across where they are rude or um, kind of called names to the other philosophies or people who are proponents of that philosophy. Um, because I think with Advaita Vedanta, they know it's just a disagreement of philosophy. There's no need to name call. Whilst with the Hare Krishnas, they obviously call us Mayavadis, which is a bit strange. So yeah, and it's interesting. I'll mention this as well, that I remember a lot of people would say, "Oh, don't read Osho or J. Krishnamurti, you'll get confused." And when you, and then when you actually read their books, you realize there's nothing to be confused about. And in fact, they actually clear your mind more than anything. So, I used to have people, and they themselves would be reading their books, but they'd be telling you not to. So, never. So that's why I think anyone that holds, like for example, I would tell people, when they ask about, for example, which version of the Bhagavad Gita to read, I never say to read the Bhagavad Gita as it is by Srila Prabhupada. Now, I can give I list my reasons always why. Now, but if say someone chooses to, I have to. That's fine. Like they're more than free to do so. Why should? And in fact, only when you read the other perspective do you know if what you're following is true or not, or whether you need to, or even it. Sometimes it shows us the gaps in our understanding and gaps in our practice. So sometimes reading the opposite point of view can be very beneficial. So I personally, um, I'm not against anyone reading the different types of philosophies. I think it's absolutely fine. Um, Namaste, Baba Junzo. Nice to see you. But let me look at some of the comments because I saw some interesting ones. Even if I only shopped at one store, I'd never get everything I need. That's very true. I have to shop at many stores to get what I want for the groceries. Like there's Indian groceries, and then there's you know, everything else groceries. So yeah, you're absolutely right there. Uh, and Destiano agreed. Um, Spiritual Samurai, I totally agree and say that all the time. Politics are divisive. I spent a week at that ashram. It's beautiful and the food is amazing. That's the beauty of many ashrams, the gurdwaras, the temples. The food is always amazing because it's made from love. That's the main thing. Well, surprised you said that. Love the honesty. I was treated differently by ISKCON members. So how were you treated by ISKCON members, Spiritual Samurai? If you don't mind sharing. Um, and then my friend Baba Junza says, my first guru was Vishishta Advaitin. My current guru is Advaita Vedantin. I agree with you. The arguments are mainly philosophy. Vishishta Advaita has utility, multiplicity. Advaita in one reality. Absolutely. Uh, is it okay for me to be spiritually jealous of that? Yeah, I think it is okay. Um, Sundarji, love this. My family are followers of Swami Dayananda Saraswati. He's really nice. I really like Swami Tadatmananda. He has there's such a beauty in the way, like him and Swami Saraswati. The fact they're in America is just a complete blessing in itself, and in the northeast coast as well, of all places. Um, but they have this. What I really like is that they have a personality, and they share their, when he was talking, he had a bit of a smile, he's not so somber. And sometimes when I look at these non-dualists, sometimes it can be really, really serious. So it's really important to just be kind of chill, um, you know. Um, but yeah, I'm glad you love them and welcome Sundaji. Sounds like a debates on TikTok and Muslims. They aren't able to listen to you and right away start going in a different direction. Yes, um, that's very, very, very true. Sundarji, I'm distantly related to him. Oh, okay. Oh, he was your grandmother's cousin. That's pretty interesting. Um, Spiritual samurai. Osho and Krishna came from a different place, I'm guessing, but ended up in the same place. Yes, I agree. Yeah, Swami Subramanian does have a great sense of humor. Yeah, I can imagine that when he went to the Himalayas, he talks. I don't think he tells everyone everything that happened in the Himalayas when he went, but I think there are some stories. But yeah, it's very important to have a sense of humor, and not to take. But see, why should a non-dualist ever take themselves seriously when we know that this name and form, this personality, is merely an appearance? Like, there's no need to be so serious about it. And I think if a non-dualist takes themselves too seriously, they can't be a non-dualist in reality. Um, you know, and that's why I don't like the neo-Advaitins. Not that they don't have a sense of humor, they do, but it comes from a condescending place. While I think from the teachers that I know in Advaita Vedanta, it's more self-deprecating. It's more like reflections upon themselves than anything else. But yeah, interesting comments. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. And let's continue.
In Hinduism's vast ocean of spiritual wisdom. That kind of freedom is actually central to the Hindu tradition.
Mm-hmm.
After all, Hinduism allows you to worship any form of God, any form you choose. Hinduism also allows you to worship God in many ways, with or without a particular form, in a temple or on a home altar, in a sacrificial fire, or even in nature. The Hindu tradition acknowledges that every person is different and has different religious preferences and different spiritual needs. This recognition is a central principle of Hinduism, a principle called Adhikari Bheda, the Bheda or difference between Adhikaris, spiritual seekers. We'll come back to this important point later.
I just want to say his Sanskrit pronunciation is on point. Like it's really, really good. I can't even get it as good as that. That's really, really good. And what is it? Every time I pause on Swamiji, he's looking like really, really cool. Every time I paused, his eyes are very like kind of compassionate. Sukha dukkhe same kritva. Nice. I like that. Made to feel like an outsider and that I don't belong there. Well, that's a bit of a shame. Hope you didn't tell them. Hope you didn't tell them that you were you have been in the non-dual circles. Um, but maybe for fairness, maybe I should one day do a reaction video to a Hare Krishna. Maybe that will be an interesting one. Just respectfully looking at their points of views. So we'll do that one day for sure. Maybe their interpretation of Advaita Vedanta and just analyzing that. So interesting concept about Adhikari Beda. He's going to come back to it. I know he does. So I'm going to allow us to come back to that. But yeah, very interesting.
The fact is, many religious organizations discourage or even prohibit their members from exploring teachings that lie outside the beliefs and doctrines they officially accept.
This is a very important point and one where I am, what Swamiji says is really important here. Any place that tells you this, like only we have the right thing, only we teach the right place, only my guru can get you there, stay away. Stay away. Because you know what? One, the teacher may not be saying that themselves. Most likely a seeker is saying that, or someone who holds a high position in the organization. Two, it's going to limit your growth. You have to learn from other places. You have to learn other perspectives. Sometimes what is taught in one place, you don't get the foundation of. You don't understand where they're talking from. And you got to check that, are there repeated talking points or are they actually thinking deeply? So I really like what Swamiji has said here, that anyone, well, he hasn't said this, but I would say that any place that does this, anyone that says this, stay away from them, because learn as much as you want and can. Like it's really up to you. But no organization should be saying, oh, if you learn from there, you're gonna you're a deceiver, or you are blacklisted, or you are, you're not a follower, you're not a true disciple. those that guilt trip you or put fear into you, they're not real spiritual organizations or teachers. Unfortunately, that's what I have to say. So don't just blindly follow anyone, you know. Um, so yeah, I like garlic way too much to be ISKCON. Yeah, I use garlic in my cooking and onions. So, in fact, yeah, it wouldn't be as good if you didn't. Neo-Advaita people, a lot comes from a place of ego, from my experience, and mine too. And I think from just listening to the Neo-Advaitans, I think there's a lot of ego, or the pseudo non-dual circles, as I like to call them, because I don't like to call them Neo-Advaita because they're not Neo-Advaita. They're more pseudo non-duality. Um, but yeah, or ego Advaita, as Martin would say.
The fact is, many religious organizations discourage or even prohibit their members from exploring teachings that lie outside the beliefs and doctrines they officially accept. These organizations often claim that such prohibitions are necessary to protect their members by shielding them from conflicting ideas and harmful influences that could cause confusion or dissension. Perhaps that's true in some situations, but it's also likely that those prohibitions are actually intended to protect the organizations, not their
Yes.
members.
Yeah, one, this is a dangerous point for him to say because not every spiritual organization will like what he has said there. But it's very, very true. Very true. I totally admire that he has said that. Great point. Great point. They think it's tamasic. Yeah, they think it's tamasic. That garlic and onions is tamasic. I think that's what it is. It makes. I think that's what it is. I'm not too sure. Yeah, you told them your Guruji's and then my mud. That's why. Spiritual samurai. That's why.
In some situations. But it's also likely that those prohibitions are actually intended to protect the organizations, not their members. Most organizations want to grow stronger, so naturally they want to retain their members and discourage any of them from leaving. So, does this explain the apparent divisiveness among followers of Shankara, Ramanuja, and Madhva who have criticized each other so vehemently? Are they, like modern religious organizations, trying to protect themselves or shield their students from different ideas? Somehow, that seems very doubtful. For example, consider Madhva himself, who once criticized Shankara as being a Prachanna Bauddha, a Buddhist in disguise. Was his criticism really for the sake of restricting his students or protecting his organization? Well, it seems much more likely that Madhva, being such a wise teacher, would have fully embraced the principle of adhikari bheda. So he would have clearly understood that his teachings of Dvaita Vedanta would be helpful for some students, but not for everyone. For this reason, it seems extremely unlikely that a great saint like Madhva would want to intellectually restrict his students or keep them from leaving, as do many modern religious organizations.
I wonder what dig he's really, what he's really doing there because it's It's there must be something that happened that he's raising this very point of gatekeeping or telling your followers not to look anywhere else. And it's true. I think there's always something deceiving in that whenever that is done. So i- um yeah, and like when, for example, you use the example of Madhvacharya saying that Adi Shankaraji is like a closeted Buddhist or a disguised Buddhist. Now, that's a philosophical point of view that he's perpetuating, not saying don't go there because he's a closeted Buddhist. That's not what he's saying. And see, that type of nuance is missing today. Like if you listen to any modern day teachers from that tradition, they'd be like, don't go to the Advaita Vedantins. They're going to confuse you. They're going to take you to hell. They're going to, you'd be worshipping nothing if you go there. And that's the danger that they put in. So that's the kind of indoctrination that they put in, and they kind of manipulate you in that way. But Madhvacharya never did that, and that's what Swamiji is making us understand, that the founders never did that. The founders never said stay here. It was like, well, this is basically from the philosophical point of view, which is something I try to, as much as I don't know if I'm successful, but that's what I try to do as well. Is like disagree on the philosophical point of view rather than, and explain why, rather than just disliking someone because it's cool to do so, you know. Um, Islam is a great example of this. Islam, Christianity, in fact, most religions, Sundarji, I think, even within, like, for example, in ISKCON, I know other spiritual organizations from India that also do this. But yes, I can see what you mean, that ISKCON definitely do that, unfortunately. I'm vegan. I eat garlic and onions all the time. Don't worry, don't feel bad. You're in Advaita Vedanta. It's fine. um, take care, Sundarji. Have a good one too. Um, if a teacher can't teach you to not need them, they're not much of a teacher. Absolutely agree, Gaiji, with that. It's um, it's absolutely true. Um, I do think that if a teacher just wants you to cling on to them, there's something wrong. They're not being honest about something. And that's when you should start thinking, what is going on? Does this teacher want me to be liberated, or to be still dependent? Whether it's an Advaita teacher or any other type of teacher, no teacher should be looking to um, make you cling on to them. That's counterproductive, in my opinion. Let's go back to our friend.
It seems extremely unlikely that a great saint like Madhva would want to intellectually restrict his students or keep them from leaving, as do many modern religious organizations. Then why did Madhva apparently condemn Shankara as being a Buddhist in disguise? Well, all great scholars like Madhva frequently use a powerful teaching technique known as Purvapaksha Siddhanta. It's a bit like the devil's advocate position, sometimes used in arguments. Purvapaksha means an opposing point of view. It's a contrary perspective that a teacher deliberately introduces into a discussion. After showing the merits of the opposing point of view, the teacher then thoroughly refutes it by showing all of its defects. Defects like logical errors and erroneous assumptions. In this way, the teacher establishes the Siddhanta, the final conclusive point of view, and endows it with much more strength and clarity. This technique uses comparison and contrast in an extremely effective manner. Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhva, and their followers all made frequent use of Purva-Paksha Siddhanta. They did so not to criticize opposing teachings, but to strengthen and clarify their own. This technique is widely used in texts, in commentaries, and even in lengthy arguments that span several centuries. A famous example of this began when a brilliant follower of Madhva named Vyasatirtha wrote a text in which he meticulously refuted Shankara's Advaita. In response, one of the greatest teachers in Shankara's lineage, Madhusudana, wrote his famous Advaita Siddhi, in which he refuted, line by line, everything written by Vyasatirtha. Then, a disciple of Vyasatirtha wrote a powerful rebuttal to Advaita Siddhi, and later that rebuttal was itself thoroughly refuted by a disciple of Madhusudana. My own guru often used this technique. When he would introduce other religious or spiritual teachings and discuss their shortcomings, some listeners would get upset. They felt, how could this great teacher of Advaita Vedanta be so antagonistic towards others? But his criticisms were never directed at people. He was criticizing their ideas that he used as Purva-Pakshas to strengthen and clarify his own teachings.
That's a really this is a really good point. I let him flow with that because there's so much to just understand from that. And where can I begin? The fact is, that's the way you want to be. Like, when we talk about debating others on TikTok, or depending on the person, but this is the approach that you can use. And it's about, and see, the difference is you don't debate in order to put the other person down, or to say the other person is wrong, but more so to strengthen your own idea or your own philosophy. That's a unique perspective. I haven't got there yet. I would love to be at that point where I can do that and try and practice this more and more, where it's more about looking at a point of view and then strengthening my own philosophy of the way I see things. But yeah, what he's saying is really important, is that it's not meant to be at people, it's towards the ideas. And I think that's what's missing today, is that there's a lot of personal egos when it comes to debating or discussing their spiritual path or their religion. Then really it should be about, the ideas should be victorious. The ideas should be more important. And that should be the focus. So I think that is something I feel needs to be more and more done today. Especially, as you mentioned, in this problem of divisiveness. So, yeah. So the Swamiji is really cool. Oh, nice. You purchased the 4 yogas of Swami Vivekanandaji. Let me know how you find it. To ISKCON people, you're in trouble too if you don't worship Krishna. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I don't worship Krishna. I don't have an idol of him. I'm probably seen as an atheist. Hi, Vivian. Nice to see you. Welcome. Welcome.
Point here is that one ideas that he used as Purva-Pakshas to strengthen and clarify his own teachings. The point here is that when truly great teachers criticize other points of view, their goal is not to be divisive or condemn others, nor is it to intellectually restrain their students or keep them from leaving. Instead, their goal is to teach with as much clarity as possible. But I have to admit that not all teachers live up to this lofty standard. Some teachers really feel that their teachings are the best, the most correct, and that all other teachings are somehow defective. Even in my own lineage, I sometimes hear such sentiments. To me, it sounds like Vedantic chauvinism.
Vedantic chauvinism. That's a good one. And he's right. I want to revisit that again because a comment took my attention.
Standard. Some teachers really feel that their teachings are the best, the most correct, and that all other teachings are somehow defective. Even in my own lineage, I sometimes hear such sentiments. To me, it sounds like Vedantic chauvinism.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I mentioned, like anyone that says that tries to show off, not worth believing in or being part of. Um, yeah, what's my YouTube Swami? Yeah, he's a pretty good YouTube Swami. I mean, I would look. I mean, if he lived nearby, I would have gone to see him, for sure. Uh, so yeah, but very, very, very wonderful man so far. So right now he's going through the problem of divisiveness, and it stems down to people that just want to say that we have the right answers, everybody else is wrong. It's not about that, and I think that is always a game of the ego and not something that we should entertain. So now we're going to go into the third part, and this may be the most important part of the video. So yeah. Oh, you're welcome, Distiana. Thank you for subscribing and listening to this. It it makes me know that this is important stuff, and people like listening to different viewpoints and different swamis. There's so much to learn from them, and they should be talked about. Their wisdom should be discussed um, and about and we should try and get more and more people to know about their works. So I think that's always the aim, or we try to. And that's very true, spiritual samurai. That's very, very true. People end up making it a very personal game. Um, because really, to be interested in the truth, you have to be really into the truth. So that's the thing.
Okay, this has been quite a serious discussion, so let's lighten it up a bit with a story that shows how we can reconcile the teachings of Advaita, Vishishta Dvaita, and Dvaita.
This is the mark of a good Swami. He's looking to reconcile, looking to bring things together. That's the beauty. That's the uniqueness. It just shows. That just goes to show, just by him doing this, what a wise person he is, and how vast his vision is. So kudos to him. Absolute respect. Absolute respect.
It's a story about three sadhus, 3 monks who were trained in the lineages of Madhva, Ramanuja, and Shankara, respectively. One day they went to the seashore. Standing in the sand, the first sadhu, who was a follower of Madhva, said to the others, "Look at the vast ocean. See how every wave is born from the ocean, sustained by the ocean, and eventually returns to the ocean." That's exactly how Madhva described the relationship between individual souls and Lord Vishnu. And see how each wave is different from all the others, and different from the ocean itself. That's like Madhva's famous doctrine of difference. And see how waves depend on the ocean for their existence, but the ocean exists independent of the waves. That's like Madhva's teaching that every soul depends on Lord Vishnu for its existence, but the Lord himself is independent of his creation. The other 2 sadhus listened carefully. Then the second sadhu, a follower of Ramanuja, described the ocean quite differently. He said, "I understand your perspective, but as you can see, every single wave is a small part of the ocean. The vast ocean possesses countless waves, just like Lord Vishnu possesses countless divine attributes, as Ramanuja said. And each wave is a tiny part of the vast ocean, just like each soul is a tiny spark of Lord Vishnu's infinite divinity. All the waves are attributes or aspects of the ocean, just like the world and souls are all various aspects of Lord Vishnu, as Ramanuja taught us." After a long pause, the third sadhu, a follower of Shankara, said to the others, "What each of you said doesn't make any sense to me." "What?" they exclaimed. "Don't you see all the waves?" "What waves are you talking about?" he said. "Don't you see the ocean?" they asked. "What ocean?" he said. "Then what do you see?" they asked. "Water," he said. "I see only water. Here there is water alone, just like Shankara said that all that exists is Brahman alone." The 3 sadhus on the beach went on arguing late into the night. Who do you think won the argument? None of them. Each sadhu was right from his own perspective. All 3
What a wonderful example. I mean, and what a wonderful story to reconcile the 3. I mean, to make us understand, essentially, they're talking about the same thing. Maybe the Advaita is much more simpler by just saying it's just water. The Vishishta Advaita saying that basically the waves are part of the ocean, and then the Dvaitin saying that the waves, each wave is different. The wave is different to the ocean itself. The ocean has a separate existence. But essentially, they're talking about the same thing. So I really liked how he said, and if you notice his words, and this is when you can catch someone out. He said when it came to Ramanujaji's teachings, I don't know if he mentioned this during Madhvaji's teachings, but during Ramanujaji's teachings, he said Ramanuja teaches us. He said us. that is a unique way, and that shows his, he's already reconciled. So now when he's doing this talk, this presentation, he's not doing it out of because it's going to be good for the YouTube algorithm, or we're going to do a reaction to it and we're going to love it. No, he's doing it because he sees, he's experienced that reconciliation, and then he's talking about it. So that's what's unique here. Total respect to him for that. Yes, I agree. The way he teaches is amazing. Really, really remarkable. Yeah, no worries, Vivian. Have a good night. So let's go back a bit.
The argument. None of them. Each sadhu was right from his own perspective. All three explanations were correct from their respective points of view. Arguing about which is right or wrong ends up being counterproductive. As long as the sadhus continued to argue, they couldn't enjoy the beauty of the vast ocean. The same is true for arguments about Advaita, Vishishta Advaita, and Dvaita. Each of these three can be considered correct from its own point of view. Arguing about them only entangles you in a web of words and logic that ultimately prevents you from appreciating the beauty of the absolute reality, however you might consider it. Now, to conclude this presentation, I'd like to share with you a personal theory about how these three different Vedantic perspectives came about in the first place. Since it's just my personal theory, you don't have to accept it as being true. Also, please remember that I've been trained in the teachings of Advaita, so my perspective will naturally be biased.
Again, just want to say, he gave his caveat. Again, the sign of an honest person, a sign of someone who is giving you the understanding of where he's coming from, rather than just saying, you know what, because I'm part of this tradition, this is why I'm saying it, or because I said it, it's got to be true. So that's unique as well from him.
This theory is based on the fact that among the three major Vedantic teachings, Advaita historically came first, followed by Vishishta Dvaita, and later yet by Dvaita. To me, it makes sense that Advaita came first, since it seems to most accurately represent the overall intent of the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutras. No doubt you can find many passages in those scriptures, especially in the Bhagavad Gita, that support Vishishta Advaita and Dvaita. But when you take those scriptures as a whole, their main focus really seems to be Advaita. Yet the teachings of Advaita are extremely lofty and can be quite difficult to grasp. As a result, these teachings can remain beyond the reach of many sincere spiritual seekers. Now, consider this. The goal of every teacher is not just to teach, but to teach in a way that's helpful to his or her students. I can imagine teachers long ago struggling to convey the highest, most elusive teachings of Advaita and completely failing to make their students understand. Some teachers would probably try to make their teachings more accessible, easier for their students to grasp. They might have modified or revised their teachings, creating what's now known as Vishishta Advaita. But even Vishishta Dvaita could be too difficult for some students to fully comprehend, so later teachers might have simplified it even further, creating the teachings we now call Dvaita. By saying all this, I don't mean to suggest that Advaita is superior to the other two, or that Dvaita is inferior in any way. It would be ridiculous to suggest that calculus is superior to algebra, or that multiplication is inferior to them both. These are different subject matters, and each subject matter is intended to meet the needs of different students. And that brings us back to the important principle of adhikari bheda, the difference of spiritual seekers. Advaita, Vishishta Advaita, and Dvaita can be understood as being intended for three different groups of seekers. Each is meant to meet the spiritual needs of all those who can fully comprehend and benefit from its teachings. But none of this suggests that one teaching is better than another. After all, the ultimate purpose of these three teachings is not to impart philosophical or spiritual principles. Their purpose is to address the problem of human suffering. And all three can most certainly bless their followers with tremendous spiritual growth and inner peace.
Right. I would like to know what everyone thought. And what your views would be in regards to this. Yeah, that was a really good video. A lot to think about, especially in the last portion, and that was about really how we need to be more understanding, we need to be more approachable, and we need to be comfortable in the fact that other seekers will have their philosophy that they want to adhere to, and that makes sense to them. And in fact, I think if you feel comfortable in what you believe in what you are following, you will always feel comfortable with what other people are following. You will not have anything like, oh, you need to convert to my religion, or you need to, or my philosophy is better, or you need to follow this philosophy. The person can make that choice for themselves, but having a conversation where you are ultimately, as he mentioned, it's about alleviating human suffering. And each one of them, in their own way, does that. Now, think about it. And what you're saying is true because, for example, someone that believes in a separation between them and God, them just doing things, like doing good things, chanting the name of God, trying to win the grace of that God. At the end of the day, what they're trying to do is get rid of human suffering. They feel sad. They want to get over that sadness, So that's fine, So I think for me, that what he has said has kind of opened a bit of my heart, I would say, when I'm conversing with others about their faith. And if I ever had to get in an official debate, where I would say official debates are done here on YouTube, if I ever did them between me and another person of a different faith, but it would be more to understand each other and each philosophy rather than being in an egoic game. So right now, for me, Advaita Vedanta does things so simply that it just makes sense. But I would be a fool to say that duality did not help. In fact, it's when I felt that duality wasn't giving me the answers, that I then moved to a more Vishishta Advaita, and then eventually evolved into Advaita Vedanta. So I think it's natural to have that progression too. And it's even possible that it can go the other way around, where someone may be an Advaita Vedantin and then go back and then go towards you know, Vishishta Dvaita or Dvaita. So whatever somebody is comfortable with should be absolutely fine. And at the end of the day, if it gets someone to be a bit more happy, who are we to say that's right or wrong? If someone is approaching us to understand our philosophy, then we talk about our philosophy and we talk about how that alleviates suffering and how that can make you get rid of your ignorance. Because remember, the whole purpose of getting rid of, the only way to get rid of suffering is to get rid of our ignorance. And whichever path we use, at the end of the day, the main point is to get rid of the suffering. So let me see. There's been some good comments. Baba Junzo, um, I think understanding the other school of thought can help people grasp Advaita better. I do agree strongly there. But you have to push them to desire to understand it first. And that's the challenge. And that's the thing, you can't push them to desire to understand it. They have to find their way. So yeah, but yeah, um, the aim is to get them to do that. I'm really glad you enjoyed this, Dostoevsky. I'm really glad that you did. Um, Although I don't think you're so new, but uh, I think you've understood the what has been said, and this is an actual, even though I've watched this before, probably watched it twice before, this will probably be my third time watching it. I still feel like I've learned something a bit more. So even for me, I'm still, learning from the great psych, Swami Tadatmananda ji and Swami Sarvapriyananda ji, Rupert Spira, um, and some others too. But yes, like for you and for me, and obviously for Baba Junzo and Gaiji and others, Advaita makes the most sense to us. It's the one that seems to be the most accessible and the simplest way to explain things and the easiest way to understand things as well, to get rid of that ignorance. Because once you get over the fact that you don't have an individual existence with your own individual suffering, and you can transcend that to understand that there's only this Brahman, this formless awareness, and the whole, and that whole formless awareness is just filled and is flowing continuously, infinitely with bliss, it automatically gives a lot of joy. But glad you really enjoyed it, Baba Junso. It's about not converting to my religion, but having that deep conversation. We can help each other be more comfortable in their philosophy. Absolutely. And that's the key. That's where we want to go. So, thank you very much for listening to this so far and watching this. So, obviously, I have an announcement. You've probably seen on TikTok, on Twitter, and on Instagram. I've done a poll, and the purpose of the poll is to um, basically see what new Patreon content I can do. Obviously, it takes me a lot of time to do the conversations with the bearded mystic. One, I have to have the conversation, then edit, and then publish it. What's easy is if I look at either the foundational texts or the Upanishads. So if you're following me on Instagram or TikTok or Twitter or all three, or two, or none of them, but you can let me know which one you prefer here on on YouTube in the comments. But um, either we'll go through the foundational text, so that includes most of Shankaracharyaji's works. So you got Tattva Bodh, Atma Bodh, you've got what else is there? Aparokshana Buddhi, and several others. There's that, or you would like me to go through the Upanishads. So really, it's down to what you all decide, or eventually, what we think is best. So the whole purpose of that is to release one of those episodes every 2 weeks. It'd be Patreon exclusive, so you would have to pay. In terms of US dollars, it's $10 a month, or on Apple podcast subscriptions, it will be $10 a month. And obviously, it will be converted to the equivalent of $10 in your local currency. So it's the whole purpose of this really is, and I'll probably, once I've done the poll, once that's finished this week, so next week I will announce what I will be doing and the purpose behind it. And I can share the purpose here, and that is to move more to doing this type of content full time. So now it's about ramping up the Patreon to support me doing this more full time. And just imagine the amount of live streams you could get if I didn't have to worry about my day job, or how much more podcasts I could do, and more content in general that I could do if that was the case. So, and it can only happen with your support. So, there's obviously different tiers on Patreon. As long as you pay the minimum of $10 in that tier, the community tier, you will get those episodes. So it may be that we may do something where we do the foundational text for 10, and then for those that do 25, they get the foundational and the Upanishads. So I haven't decided how that's going to work, but if you're interested, do let me know which one you would like me to start. So let's see how it goes. But yes, thank you very much for being with me today to watch this wonderful video. I'll be back next week to look at another video. If you have any videos you would like me to look at or suggest, do send them across to me. And yeah, until then, take care, and I shall see you again very soon. Take care. Bye.